Thanks for joining us for another episode of Off Script with Expel. I'm Tina Velez with my wonderful host, John Hensinski. And today we have an excellent guest. Daniel Miesler is joining us. So, Daniel, thank you for taking the time to be our first in-person recording.
Oh, fantastic.
And we kind of appreciate with this setup that we've got going that you're going to be a willing guinea pig and participant. So what we'd like to do is tell the audience a little bit about yourself. And probably start with what you do now as founder of Unsupervised Learning.
Yeah, so about 5 months ago, I left my hopefully last regular job, and am now doing my own stuff full time. And so that's basically a split of building products and services around security and the A word, which I will not mention. Well, actually, we probably will later. But so doing that, doing consulting and advising, and then also the show. So the show just kind of falls out of all the other work. Yeah, it's been crazy 5 months.
And for our audience who might not be familiar with unsupervised learning, like the overall gist, like what is it that you convey? You put out a bunch of stuff into the universe there every week and on the podcast as well, but tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's, fundamentally the DNA is security, right? Because that's what I've been doing. I think I'm about to hit 24 years. 99 is when I started doing security. So the DNA is kind of security, but it's kind of, so it's security, technology, and humans is the gist of it. So it's like security and tech, fine, but why do we care if we're not talking about how it impacts humanity, right? So that's kind of where I focus, is like, why does it matter? So we talk about the news, but it's like, why does it actually matter?
And so part of getting there, you just alluded to 24 years in industry. Like, walk us through that path. Like, how did you start there? And I know the direction that you went, but take us down that whole journey.
Yeah, so it was, so I did high school, Army, then college, and my first job out of college was a firewall engineer at a credit card processing company, which was fantastic because there was like 10 different firewalls in multiple chains, so you had to like source and destination mapping and everything. It was really exciting, and I got exposed to all sorts of security stuff there, just regular security engineer stuff. I left there to do pen testing full time for a number of years. Went on to AFLAC to do more AppSec stuff, and I pretty much transitioned directly into AppSec after that. And then kind of started consulting. Actually, the previous job was consulting as well. And from there, I moved back home, which is from the Bay Area, and moved back here to join HP. And since then, I've been at IOActive, Apple, Robinhood, and now independent.
So there's one of the things that we wanted to really focus on with this series was that people side, like the human side, because that is so forgotten. So very glad that you are somebody who's always looking at the why does this matter, how does it impact, and thinking about kind of those long-term trajectories and implications of things for the magic blank word. But one of the things that we've kind of dug into with all of our guests is like wanting to really poke at what are those things along that journey that helped you really inform kind of where you decided to end up now? Like, you want to focus full-time on unsupervised learning, like getting all of these insights kind of out there and getting these dialogues going. Is there anything from the past that really drove you towards that?
I would say I've been thinking for a very long time about why we do things and what's the actual goal that we're pursuing. And having that be a distant goal that's far away, it's hard to get to, and it's worthwhile. So to me, spending my time at a company that I'm not super excited about has just been the sole pressure for me. And I haven't even had it like super bad, like compared to other people. But I like the vibe of you are actually waking up to work on the things that really, really you care about.
I'd be interested in learning. You talked a little bit about having an impact on humanity, which is remarkable. And you talk about wanting to be passionate about either building an organization or working for an organization that has the right impacts. When you wake up, what are the things that really drive you? When you talk about humanity, or even in the company you're building and scaling now, like what are the big impacts you want to have on the world or people? What are those outcomes that really get you up every day and get you inspired to keep moving?
Yeah, I'm obsessed with pretty much a single idea, which is the idea of having an organization, a department, a country, a human define what they're about, define goals, define challenges, and then capture all the activity that they do during the course of a day or a week or a month or a year, and then be able to ask the question, am I pursuing the right things? Am I doing the right things? Because I personally feel a lot of people are just kind of, they're not feeling great because they're kind of drifting, they're kind of a little bit lost, and maybe they've not defined this for themselves, or maybe they did and just kind of drifted away from it. But in security, I see it everywhere. It's just like, what are we doing? Oh, we have projects. And then a new leader comes in, and pretty soon they're just like budget after budget, the money's being spent, but they're not really sure exactly where they're going. Yeah. And I talked to some friends who aren't as happy as I think maybe they could be, and they haven't defined that for themselves. They're not sure where they're going. They're just kind of like performing actions. So I'm really obsessed with having a framework for defining that for yourself, or for a company, or for a country, or for a planet, and chasing it.
That's amazing. I want to just ask a couple follow-ups. Like, my personal belief, kind of goals are your GPS system in life. Where am I going and what am I doing? I would be super curious when you look at your professional experience. Like, of course, we're going to pull up your LinkedIn profile before chatting, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy's been everywhere. This is amazing. Did you grow up like this, where you said, listen, I'm 15-year-old Daniel, I'm setting all of these goals, or are these things that you learned throughout your career? Or, can you talk to us about how you got to this moment where goals are really important, without them you're lost, and goals kind of make you feel good either professionally or personally? Is that something you grew into, or is that something that from the jump?
Yeah, I had to grow into it because I didn't know what the goal was. I was kind of pushed by curiosity, as opposed to like pulling towards a goal. It's really hard to set, I think, those types of goals when you're that young. For me, it was just like voracious learning and curiosity. Yeah. And that was sort of propelling me forward. And then, it started to form later.
That's super interesting.
And you've always pushed for that more kind of holistic view, and I think that's an important distinction to make. Just stuff that we've been exposed to, we've seen a lot of that kind of chasing that next project, chasing that next program, but it's missing that bigger, the why does this matter? How does it tie back to what the business is doing? So I would love to see more organizations kind of embrace that type of thinking, and just people as well. Like, what is that big picture? What is that outcome that we're looking for, as opposed to a series of tasks and, okay, we finished that this quarter, now we move on to the next one. It's all in pursuit of what? That bigger picture. And John poked earlier at, he was asking, like, did he write this blog post back in the day about something? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe he did. And it turns out.
Yeah, so, Daniel, he's right here. It's funny how history works. It's probably about a little over a decade ago, I was working for BAE Systems, part of the internal security program. And at the time we were trying to write our own snort signatures, and there was this blog that you wrote, we'll share with the listeners. And it was a technical blog on how to write snort signatures the right way, what those variables meant. And I was sharing with Tina prior to the recording, I was like, there's blogs that you'll look at and you'll be like, I learned a lot, that was amazing. But then there's blogs that you're like, I'm doing my job and the blog is up on the screen as well. And so this morning when I had a chance to meet you, I was like, that's the guy that wrote that post. Number one, thank you for writing that. It had an impact on how I think about snort and network signatures at the time. But like, I know you write a lot and you do a lot of blogging. When you come up with certain topics and contents, and I know the blog I'm talking about was years ago, but today, are goals in mind when you're thinking of what to write about or share, or when you share things like that, or even on Twitter? I know you're very active there. Talk to us about the things you want to share. Is it like, these things I'm passionate about, or no, I've got some goals where I want to learn more in these certain areas? Just kind of curious how you think about that.
Yeah, the guiding thing that I really enjoyed the last few years is this. I can't remember the director's name, but he won for Parasite. He won the Oscar for Parasite, and it was about poverty in Korea. And somebody asked him, "How did you come up with this amazing concept?" And he said that he learned the lesson from Scorsese. Told him, the most personal is the most creative. So if you start thinking about what could possibly be creative, and you start thinking about creative topics, you're kind of intellectually exploring that. As opposed to if you're vibrating at a frequency, you're just, I love these things. I just have to talk about them. You will find people who read that, and they will absorb that interest in whatever it is you're talking about. So the best possible solution is to just be interested in things. And then the next step for me is I want to learn about the thing. I go and research it. I can't find anything. So now I'm like, well, I'm going to teach myself, and I'm going to do it in public and turn that into a resource, and hopefully help other people as well.
I think that's an incredible framework, and thank you for being that person, because there are certain areas where you look at that work and you say, well, thank you for kind of leading the charge here. Now you're able to scale that thinking out across a population of folks as well, which is really cool.
And I've also always liked, there's a bunch of stuff that I cannot keep up with. And you have not only that drive in terms of the curiosity, I'm going to teach myself this stuff, and if it doesn't exist, I'm going to create it. Like, being able to have that kind of feedback loop, I think, is incredible. And I know it's been really helpful for me over the years. I'm still thinking back to the IoT book that you wrote years ago, and there was something about your writing structure, like how you format. You really go for simplicity in kind of the framework, and it's like, here's the issue, here's kind of my analysis of it, again, here are the outcomes, or here's like the high level things that should be the takeaways. And I found that to be such a refreshing way of just approaching a topic and being able to tear into it in a way that was not overwhelming. Because at some point, like, you've spanned so many domains within security that, like, I have you're amazing. But how you're able to convey those things that tend to be rather complex topics, like, you're able to simplify it and get that basic understanding across to an audience that is just incredible to me.
Appreciate that.
And you continue to do it with we're going to say the word now, the AIs.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because I actually expect my traffic to drop by probably 80 or 90%. I'm guessing within my website traffic to drop by 80-90%. I'm guessing 6 to 18 months.
Why?
So all those primers that I've written, they're full of flags and switches for commands. How do you find NTP traffic using TCP dump? Right? It's port 123 UDP. Well, I don't go to websites anymore. I use my own stuff a lot of times. I just go and look at the flag, because I'll forget the flag, especially for TCP dump. But now I do command. Actually, I don't know. It's command pinky, command whatever that is. Command pinky pulls up an interface to GPT-4 and the API, and I just say, how do I capture NTP traffic in TCP dump? And it gives me the answer. I didn't have to go anywhere.
So what you're saying, I'm going to break it down for folks, is what I think you're saying, Daniel, which I agree with, is the people visiting to my website are going to go down to 6 to 18 months, but they're going to access that content a different way, which doesn't involve me directly visiting your website, because I'm going to use an AI agent or a command line tool to be able to ask a question, and hopefully that AI is reading the right information or sources. Am I thinking about that the right way?
That's right. I mean, so it will have already consumed the man pages and or other tutorials all over the internet, so it knows what the flags are, and it knows the meaning of NTP, it knows the meaning of everything, so it just gives me this little tiny blurb. because even if there was a great resource, I'd still have to scroll down and find it.
Yep.
Or do a Command F and find the NTP stream. So, yeah, it's interesting. And in fact, the whole explainer category, I think, is in some danger.
I'd be curious if you have any opinions on, let's say in that scenario where like I open up ChatGPT-4 and I'm asking questions that were being answered based upon the data you've provided. Do you have any opinions on what I'll call sourcing? Like when I get that information back from like an AI agent, there's, at least the ones I'm using, there's no concept of like powered in part by Daniel, right? It's just the text, it's the summary.
Yeah.
Is there a right way to think about giving credit or sourcing or anything? Do you have any opinions on that? I'm just curious.
No, it's I don't think that's going to happen. So if it comes down to truth, if you're finding the truth that this is the way you do this flag, the model only cares about what's true. It only cares about concepts.
Yep.
So it's not a database. It doesn't have. It doesn't actually know how it received that training. It might have read 4 documents or 4 million documents, which taught it that. Either way, it's now learned it, and so you can ask questions about that thing. But no, I think once wisdom or knowledge or whatever facts, data hits the internet, gets crawled and wrapped into a model, it's just urine in the pool, and it's not coming out.
Well, that's a way to think of it. I had not considered that approach. But
we're gonna add it to the quotables for the show.
That's
okay.
have to go in there. But that sourcing question is really interesting because I've been thinking about that in terms of the generated art and what that does to the concept of creation and what it does to the people who still make things organically. Like it's definitely a very different way of thinking derivatively about creating content.
Yes.
And how that differs from what you've been doing for years, which is literally consuming things and then putting it out. Now you've got a much more efficient and effective way to do this because of all of the stuff that has seemingly happened overnight. And we know that that's not the case, but given how long you've been paying attention to this, like, what do you think about that kind of speed and that change that we've seen in recent months?
It's ridiculous. I mean, we've been here for how long? 3 days or however long we've been here at this conference, and I feel months behind. This project called LangChain is basically the craziest piece of software I've ever seen. It is the connective tissue for all these different AI tools, and they're just releasing constantly. And I mean, I'm not coding on it because I'm here, and I look at Twitter and I'm like, oh, that's amazing. And it's like, it's so crazy that I can have code open that's amazing and I'm super excited and I'm calling people and telling them about it. Tweet pops up and I'm like, oh, well, this is garbage. Start over, use this instead. So it's just like standing on shoulders in the time span of hours, not months, right? So GPT-4 access came out whenever that was that 5 weeks ago or something? The API access, and there were new companies and apps and working websites within hours.
Yep.
Then you have the alternative of like crypto. It's been around for what, 12 years, 15 years? They still haven't figured out what it does.
Yep.
It's insane.
Yep.
And I think content-wise, I put out a thing called the hierarchy of content in terms of vulnerability to AI. And basically at the bottom you have like collection, and it kind of moves up into summarization, moves up into analysis, and then the higher one is like strong opinions, and then there's just like creation. Like you're either creating a new product in an existing idea, or even better, a new idea with a new product line. So it's like a net new. And AI in general is carving out that whole bottom. Like I can write a prompt that does all my blog posts way better, right? In fact, I can write new tutorials using the AI tools that I built. I just create bullets and it gives me an amazing tutorial.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where things are going. It's almost like you need to have a forceful opinion, I think, for what's coming next. Because if you're just sort of conveying the stuff, you'll be vulnerable to AI.
Yeah, can I tap on that a little bit? From the practitioner in me wants to ask, do you have any opinions or thoughts regarding we're seeing what Microsoft is doing with AI with like the notion of Copilot, and there's some other things kind of popping up in terms of companies like trying to take advantage of AI from a security analysis. For my SOC analysts that are listening or watching this episode, what do you think's ahead for security analysis? Do we see like AI becoming decision support and enabler? Realistically, what do you think is going to happen in the next 6, 12, or 18 months as it relates to AI's impact on, we'll call it security operations? Any opinions or thoughts there?
Oh, yeah. Do we have a few minutes?
Yes.
I
think we've got plenty. Okay. So, yeah.
All right. So this is going to be a crazy one. Okay. So LLMs, in my opinion, are going to eat software. Software basically goes away. It becomes use cases inside of LLMs. And here's why. So the use case I actually use is the SOC use case. Okay, so-and-so's laptop at 2:45 a.m. Connects to the VPN from Japan. 2:45 a.m. whatever Pacific time. And it connects in and it hits a file share, which has got a bunch of important docs on it. So here's the question: was that malicious? We don't know, right? Because we don't have context. So much of the RSA for is around like how do we gather that context, right?
Yep.
And so tier 1 analysts, tier 2 analysts, these different types of roles and the software combined, they all bring that context together so you have an actual picture and then you can make a decision. LLMs, GPT-4, for example, has all of human history, or some significant subset of it, in its brain, live and active. So you can ask it about puppy dog tales and the entire expanse of Shakespeare and airplane wings and say, what are the similarities between these? And it can operate. The entire model, once it's trained, it just knows it instantly. Software is about to be that for a company. So imagine every Slack message, every meeting transcript, all of Splunk, or whatever the analog is, all of that content will just be smashed into a model for the company. And this is going to take some time because this is super expensive.
Yep.
It's not even really possible right now. That's why OpenAI is kind of winning, because they started early. But anyway, it's going to be like GPT-5 or whatever at the bottom, and you could ask that one about anything. And then here will be your company model. So when you ask that company model, is this malicious? It'll say, no, it's not malicious. Actually, he went home. He actually, his parents moved back to Japan. And he's there, and he just checked in on Slack. And also we can see his phone. And this is legit. And you could, it used to be you couldn't explain this. Now you ask it to explain itself, and it'll give you the reasons. It's benign.
Yeah, it's because in the current world, we got an alert, VPN connection, 2:45 a.m. PT. SOC analyst is going to pick that up and ask questions that they know how to ask using the data they have available, which is not going to be as expansive as everything that you said. So in that world, the ability to transact across, I've got GPT at the bottom, my business model, the ability to go everywhere and get that context and say, based upon probability, blah, blah, blah. No, this is benign. If you want to poke further, maybe a human can further validate that, but I think you're right there. How long until we get to that world that you've just described? It's going to take a little bit. Do you have any?
It's going to take a bit because when you have the problem of the SOCOM problem, you have to have all these graphics cards, right, to be able to do this for anyone who wants to implement it. And those problems will get easier and cheaper and stuff like that. But It's going to take a little while also to get all that data pointed in the right place. Like, that's hard enough with current technology. It's hard enough to get everything pointed at Splunk, right?
Most places still aren't doing it, right? Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
thinking about that broader contextualized set, like this now corpus of knowledge about an organization, about its people, scraping calendars, email, Slack, like being able to do stuff that right now still involve a lot of manual steps. So I'm thinking around the same scenario, that SOC operator may have certain parts of that equation automated, right? Like you're able to use some workflows and some efficiencies that exist now, but that bigger picture around the human side, which is where a lot of this other stuff comes into play, I think will be fascinating when we get there. But it's also a little terrifying when I think about how much information is required to get to that state. And then there's also the question of the hygiene of some of those data sources.
I think it's a bad story there. I think security is about to take a major hit, specifically privacy. So I think the business is about to get more excited about this than they've ever been excited about any tech. And they're going to say, I want this tool right now. I want every single data source pointed at that new fancy lake thing that you have. And this is like, here's the actual threat. McKinsey walks in the door and says, I'm here to talk about your headcount problem. And the CEO is like, what do you mean? I have 7,500 employees, everything's fine. That's a problem. That's 7,500 problems. Let's decompose your entire business into a set of cogs. Okay? This piece of paperwork comes in, it gets a stamp, it goes here, it's a Slack update, a report is generated. It then takes this giant AI engine, which I'm sure it's working on right now, and just imports these individual components into this thing. And suddenly thousands of jobs are no longer needed. And that applies to anything with orchestration, right? It applies to manual processes, and a whole bunch of you'll still need the human in the loop, right? So a lot of people will survive that, and ideally they would up level into some other role or whatever, and there will be a lot of that. But I would say something like 80% before too long. Information workers is severely attacked, and here's the reason it's going to happen so fast this time, is because now it is actually a C team sitting with a laptop with an interface. And it's like a dashboard with a chat interface. And you basically say, what are all my competitors doing right now? What are we not doing towards our goals? What can we be doing to change our org chart, change our OKRs to attack this specific idea that a competitors came out with? You'll be like, org chart, boom, boom, boom. Click here to enable. Boom, shoots it up to Workday. It schedules the email invite for the announcement that the org is different. It's going to allow them to see things. Here's a great example. Let's say goal number 1 is protect customer data. Goal number 2 is protect IP from leaving. That is a common way, most companies. And CEO comes in the morning, and she's like, okay, it's 7:45 a.m., 7:20 a.m., whatever, early. Did anything happen yesterday in the company that puts our goals at risk? And it says, actually, yeah, a couple of engineers got together last night in the middle of the night, and they had a brilliant idea. They pulled multiple people into Slack, following people. They took a copy of the customer data, made a copy, and they're building a new website, and they're pointing it at it, and they're planning to launch in 14 hours. How many pieces of information does that require? Because it could just be like, oh, and by the way, here's the GitHub repository. So it's like, if you have the right questions, you get the answer immediately. It's completely going to change things.
do you see, I want to replay back something I think I heard. What I think I heard you say is, given the impact of this technology and these capabilities, organizations might be willing to trade some
Yes.
level of privacy to be able to get these things.
Yes. Yeah, the business is going to be like, I need this right now. I need to be able to move the business this quickly. Because they could just be like, make me a chart that looks like this, make me a business plan. You're going to be able to move so fast as a business. But it's going to require everything. All the text, all the transcripts, everything in Slack. And there's a lot of nasty stuff that happens in Slack. But people dropping secrets, people being mean to each other, being nasty, it's full of passwords. The management's going to be like, I don't care, just put it in there.
You made a really good point where it's giving you access to everything. Is there also, maybe I'm willing to make some trade-offs with privacy, but from a legal perspective, that does it potentially open up a company to a little bit more risk? Imagine a prompt where show me all inappropriate behavior in Slack for the past 24-hour period. I'm just thinking out
100%.
loud. Yeah.
100%. So, yeah, those scenarios are going to be legion. And I don't know how forcefully the compliance side is going to push back. They will push back some, and the privacy people are going to push back some.
But is it enough? I don't think it will be.
No, they're going to get steamrolled by the business, because this is like businesses getting databases and Excel sheets. Okay, that's how big this jump is. Much bigger actually, but it's just like a 0 to a 1 compared to what they used to be able to do, and it won't be enough. It won't be enough. And of course, they're powerful people, and regulatory capture, they'll find a way to push back regulations that are trying to stop it. I think there will be pushback and friction, but it's going to push through. Here's another really powerful example. I assume both of you have had trouble with vendor assessments.
Perhaps, yes.
Yes. Nightmare, right? You know, the other nightmare is software supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens if you have every install of every piece of software, including the version and the configuration setting? When Log4j happens, you say, what should I patch first? And how do I make that happen? So it knows all the owners of every box and every code base. It knows all the owners. So it knows all the owners. It knows exactly who to go to. But more importantly, it's not going to give you a list of every single piece of software of that type. It's not going to be like, here's where you have it installed. Instead, it's going to say, here's where you have it installed, but also where it's unprotected. If you say prioritize by the things where there are fewer controls, it'll tell you that.
Yep.
And what if it's the wrong version? It'll take it out of the list.
Yep.
What if it's there's a flag set that mitigates it? It knows that. So it's going to give you a pruned perfect list, including who to contact. And it'll be like, oh, by the way, do you want me to reach out to them on Slack? Do you want me to add to their calendar? It's just like, so Log4j, that turns from a 2-week nightmare to a, hey, there's a new vuln, initiate orchestration.
With the advancement of good, like these are really incredible capabilities, comes like the advancement of evil. That's kind of how it works. And I'm only asking this question because I would consider you an expert in this area. And I'm not, for the audience, I'm not trying to sound like marketing FUD here. I'm genuinely curious, Daniel. Let's say from a security operations perspective, I've been in security operations for pretty much my entire career. Like for those security practitioners or folks at home that are like, okay, I'm imagining this world. From a defensive perspective, what does that look like? And I'm going to say some things that are going to be wrong here. If I have access to that type of information, the ability to say a system I can query to get immediate answers, are there defensive controls and things that folks should start thinking about? Example, and I could be wrong, like, well, just tell me where, like, critical data is stored, and now I'm going to go and attack that system. I'm probably oversimplifying, but with those capabilities, what does the future look like in terms of being able to or wanting to defend, the wrong things from happening against that data set?
Yeah, it's really, really exciting. Really exciting. Because one of the most complex things is that my background is pretty heavily in offensive security. I've done a lot of red teaming, pen testing, that sort of thing. Red teaming is like the top of the top, including internal. Because it's like, this vast, especially in a really complex environment, you got all this old tech, you've got all this new tech, you've got a million different systems. You got endpoint systems, printers, you could use so many paths.
Yep.
And the combinations turn it from, millions into millions of millions. It's just like almost infinite. And that's why really good humans are really good at this, right? But think of their capabilities compared to knowing it all at the same time and keeping that perfectly in your mind. To them, it's no different than, there's a peanut in my hand.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't, but whatever. It's
peanuts sound good. I wish.
Well, I mean, to it, there's no difference between saying count 2 plus 2, which LLMs are bad at math, by the way. But it can count 2 plus 2. It's equally easy for it to count that as it is to say, give me a mapping of all the different attack paths for a red team. What are all the different ways I can get in? And then you could say, what are all the different ways I can get in if I don't have access to this technology? Or if I do have access to this, what is my best path if I want to go to not be found? It'll just answer you instantly and just be like, try these 37 ways instead. Well, what if I don't have this computer and I can't use a browser? If you can't use a browser, you should do this instead. It's like, it is the collection of all red teaming knowledge encapsulated in questions and answers. And not only that, but the main thing I'm working on now is a thing called agents inside of LangChain. So you can actually just hand the tool, hand tools to an agent and tell the agent what you want to do, and it will use whichever tool it needs to. So it can pivot, it can go read documents, it can make requests, it can do scans. I'm using it already against my own APIs. It is stunning. It is absolutely stunning. And so here's the way I see this playing out for blue versus red. So red is going to have a massive advantage initially because they're already, attack surface management, for example. You just collect everything. I have a platform that I built. And it's all text files. Well, you can now read text files and consume that into the LLM. So when because the LLM isn't trained on the stuff that I just scanned, because training stopped in 2021. But if I have it in this local directory, when I make a request that says, tell me how I can break into this company, it'll read all the text files and send that as part of the request. So I'm getting the knowledge, the current knowledge, leveraged by the LLM. So that's really powerful.
Thinking from a defender perspective, is this going to bring back a different type of thinking around deception? What does a honeypot future from a data perspective look like in this kind of model?
That's a really great question. I had not thought about it. I think there might be some shenanigans in how we train the model to actually train in fake things in case somebody is using a similar model. Yeah, I'll have to think about that more. That's definitely going to be a thing.
So I'm thinking from an adversary's perspective, there is going to be this initial period, like you said, where they're going to have an incredible advantage.
Yeah.
How long does it take for the defensive and the blue team mindset to shift accordingly?
Yes.
And what needs to happen? I'm going to go back to thinking about this from the data perspective, right? We're rolling all of these sources into one place and we're able to essentially interrogate it, and thinking around an organization, an environment, the personas in it. There has to be some element of false information in there.
Yes.
Like I can't see a way around that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely going to happen. What I like about this is once blue catches up, I think blue kind of surpasses. Because the big problem is the asymmetry between, like, you know, the attacker only has to be right once or something. Well, when you have an LLM defending you, the whole game is making sure you have the right data in there and making sure you're asking the right questions and that you've assigned the agents to do the right thing. So, for example, you can have an agent that just says, if you see this port pop up, find the box, whatever, make a request, make sure it gets turned off, or whatever. Or you could say, write a firewall rule to block it. And most importantly, it can see everything all at once, which means all your millions of IPs, all your millions of ports on those millions of IPs, brand new domains pop up. Shadow IT, you can find the shadow IT. As long as you're asking the right questions. You gotta have the data in there and you have to be asking the right questions. But what will happen is once you have that pipeline trained, so you have this model being updated all the time, and you have your giant set of questions, which is your blue team, or it's really your security program, pointed at the context, that's really sick automation. Then it's just a matter of the red team also has that, but they don't have the same data that you do. So they're not going to be able to ask the model to attack you unless they have access to the model. At that point, they're already inside, so that's not good. But yeah, there's some weird stuff that's going to happen. So, for example, if you get access as an attacker to one of these models, can you imagine write me a ransomware email using the most sensitive data that we own in the company and send it to the most influential people that will get them to pay the most money. So it writes the emails for you. It goes and collects the data and does snippets. You could have basically automated ransomware campaigns. I actually heard that from.
That's
yeah. No, it's going to be crazy.
So we're talking a lot about the future,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's a rapidly coming at us future. But one of the things that we do like to focus on in these conversations is really thinking back to the past.
Mm-hmm.
So you're always looking forward.
Mm-hmm.
So this is probably going to be an interesting question. Like, where you are now, what kind of 3 lessons along the way would you tell your past self? When you're first starting to do that network stuff many, many years ago, what do you wish you'd known?
I would say, honestly, unified broadcast channels. Like, if I had done newsletter early, I feel like newsletter, audio, video, you want to have those going out at a regular beacon and kind of ignore it and just focus on your thoughts. Whereas I was too deep into I was writing my own blogging platforms. I did my own email for a long time. I'm chaining, spam assassin and all this stuff. But I don't know. I'm not sure I could really convince myself not to do those things because it's like, first of all, it wasn't easy to do back then. So I guess I had to learn it. I would say curiosity, authenticity, and I really think stoicism is a huge thing. I actually saw, who's the Forrest Gump guy? Tom Hanks. So he was like, his favorite lesson, and I thought this was great, was this too shall pass. So you're not feeling any sort of enthusiasm from your content. Nobody seems to like it. This too shall pass, right? Everyone thinks you're amazing. This too shall pass. And it's just like, I love the stoicism. It's just like, just keep doing your thing. And it goes back to the goal thing. Keep focused on that distant thing and just kind of don't care what happens in between.
Are you still making music?
Not yet. I'm trying to head in that direction, but then AI happened, so now it's kind of postponed.
On the topic of AI, before we kind of wrap up the episode, I think a big part of why Tina and I started this series was we wanted to have an avenue or forum where we help folks that are maybe watching this break in and learn new things.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked a lot about AI. It's been a fantastic conversation. Let's say I'm a SOC analyst or someone that's looking to break into security, and I hear all this talk about AI, and I don't know what it is. Like, any guidance, like 3 tips or tricks to like even just start to kind of come up to speed in terms of what's happening. It could be maybe you've written a blog post, or maybe you can reference some. There are a couple things for that person that's watching right now, right? That's like, this is amazing. It sounds really awesome. Where do I get started?
His newsletter.
Please plug
Subscribe
it.
to Unsupervised Learning.
Please.
There's a project called LangChain. It's got great documentation. That is the project everyone should check out.
Okay.
And just type LangChain tutorial into YouTube. It's like the best. There's a whole bunch of influencers writing or doing videos on this, and they walk you through the tutorial. And it shows you how to use all the different tools.
Oh, cool.
That's like the most interesting project out there right now.
Interesting. Other than yourself, you mentioned there are other influencers. Who are the people that you follow that maybe our audience could follow as well?
The guy who made LangChain, he's got like 2 first names. It's like Chase Harrison or something. Is that the last name? I don't know. But yeah, I think his name's Chase.
Got it.
Or no, maybe it's Harrison Chase.
Well,
I get confused. But
let us know. Like, audience, let us know.
It's the creator of LangChain. He puts out a whole bunch of videos. He also puts out videos of other people who are doing cool stuff with this tech.
Well, I want to take the conversation back to you. Our audience would love to know how they can connect with you. So where can we find you online?
Yeah, I mean, it's just first name, last name.com, danielmiesler.com, and Daniel Miesler on Twitter, and also the newsletter, Unsupervised Learning.
And the podcast.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're busy.
Absolutely.
Well, is there anything else we want to cover? If not, Tina, do you want to take us out of this?
This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you. It got much more philosophical than I think we'd originally planned, but hey, that's fine. But no, thank you very much for joining us.
Sure,
this was wonderful, and I hope our audience likes it. And I don't know, say stay tuned for the next episode where we have another riveting conversation and don't sell you Tupperware. So yeah, that's it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Daniel, thank you again.
All right.
Appreciate it.